3 races. That's all it took for Formula One to start collapsing. A 49% drop in audience. Drivers saying the cars are unpredictable, some calling them dangerous. And now, a massive leak confirms the FIA is changing the rules before Miami. Not next season. Not later this year. Right now. Because these cars can lose half their power instantly. On a straight. At full speed. Creating speed differences that should not exist in Formula One. And after one incident, the drivers didn't just complain. They pushed back. Together. And when the entire grid pushes back, the FIA has no choice. But here's the part no one is talking about. These changes won't just fix the problem. They could completely reshuffle the grid. Teams that dominated could lose everything. Teams that were struggling could suddenly fight at the front. Which means this isn't just a safety update. It's a turning point. For the championship. For the sport. And for who really controls Formula One. Subscribe now? Because what was leaked about Miami is only the surface of a much bigger crisis. At first, no one inside Formula One called it a crisis. Because on the outside, everything still looked the same. Cars on track. Crowds in the stands. Lights out. Race on. But underneath that surface, something was already breaking. Lap times were slower than expected. Not dramatically, but enough to raise concern. Enough for engineers to start asking questions. Because these cars were supposed to be faster, more advanced, more efficient. And yet, they were spending less time at full power. Think about that. More electric energy, more technology, more complexity, but less performance when it actually matters. And that's where the first doubts appeared. Quietly, inside the data. Because the issue wasn't just speed. It was how that speed behaved. Or more precisely, how it disappeared. Because this is the detail that changed everything. When the battery runs out, the car doesn't lose power gradually. It drops. Instantly. Half the power. Gone. In a fraction of a second. And that creates something Formula One has never had before. Extreme speed differences. On the same straight. At the same time. One car at full attack. Another suddenly slowing down. And neither driver fully aware of what the other is experiencing. That shouldn't exist. Not at this level. Not in this sport. But now, it does. And drivers felt it immediately. Not just once. Every lap. That moment of hesitation. That moment where the car doesn't respond the way it should. And here's where it escalates. Because once drivers lose confidence, everything changes. They brake earlier. They hesitate on throttle. They stop attacking the limit. And races stop being pure competition. They become controlled, managed, calculated. But this is where things get even more serious. Because not every car behaves the same way. Some recover energy faster. Some deploy it more efficiently. Some hit that power drop earlier. Others much later. Which means, on the same straight, you can have completely different realities. One driver fighting. One defending. And one just trying to survive the system. That inconsistency is what triggered the first real alarm. Not publicly. Not yet. But inside the teams. Inside the FIA. Because this wasn't just a design challenge anymore. It was a structural flaw. Built into the regulation itself. And once that realization started to spread, everything accelerated. Meetings. Data sharing. Discussions that normally take months. Compressed into days. Because now the question wasn't how to improve the system. It was how to contain it. Before it got worse. And before something happened that no one could ignore. And then, it happened. Not a theory. Not a prediction. A real moment on track. The kind that forces everyone to stop and pay attention. Because up until that point, everything could still be debated. Engineers could argue it was manageable. Teams could say it was part of the learning curve. The FIA could wait, observe, delay. But once the first serious incident occurred, that option disappeared. Because when a driver says something is going to happen, and then it does, you don't analyze anymore. You react. Carlos Sainz warned about it early. He said the speed differences were too big. That one car on full power, and another in energy loss, would eventually collide. And that's exactly what the system was creating. Cars behaving completely differently, in the same piece of track, at the same time. And when that prediction became reality, everything changed. Because now, this wasn't a performance issue. It was a safety issue. And safety forces decisions. Immediate ones. But here's where the situation becomes even more intense. Because the FIA wasn't just reacting to the incident. They were reacting to what it revealed. This wasn't bad luck. It wasn't a driver error. It was the system behaving exactly as designed. And that's the most dangerous scenario possible. Because it means the problem isn't occasional. It's repeatable. Every lap. Every race. Until something is done. And that realization? Spread fast. Through teams. Through engineers. Through drivers. Until it reached the point where no one could defend it anymore. Not publicly. Not privately. And that's when the tone inside Formula One shifted completely. From discussion to urgency. Because now, doing nothing was no longer an option. But here's the detail that pushed everything even further. It wasn't just the incident. It was what drivers were saying after it. Not frustration. Not anger. Concern. Real concern. About what could happen next. Because they understood something critical. If this could happen once, it could happen again. And maybe worse. And when drivers start thinking like that, they stop focusing on racing. They start focusing on risk. And that's when the sport begins to break down. Because Formula One cannot exist if drivers don't trust what's underneath them. So the pressure became undeniable. Not from one voice. From all of them. A unified message. Clear. Direct. This needs to change. Now. And that's the moment the FIA lost the ability to wait. Because from that point on, every race without changes was a risk. A visible one. A growing one. And that's what forced the reaction. Not planned. Not scheduled. Emergency. Because what comes next is not a gradual update. It's a rapid intervention. One that will directly affect how these cars behave. From one race to the next. And more importantly, who benefits when everything suddenly changes. And this is where the situation explodes. Because once the FIA decides to intervene, they don't just tweak the system. They start rewriting it. And what leaked before Miami is not a minor adjustment. It's a complete shift in how these cars will behave. The first change is the most aggressive. Reducing electric deployment. Cutting the maximum power the battery can deliver on the straights. Which means one thing immediately. Lower top speeds. But more importantly, smaller differences between cars. Because right now, the gap between full power and no power is too extreme. That's what creates the danger. That's what creates the unpredictability. So by lowering the ceiling, the FIA is trying to reduce the fall. And on paper, that makes sense. But in reality, it changes everything. Because some teams built their entire advantage on that extra deployment. They mastered efficiency. They maximized those moments of full power. And now, those moments are being limited. Which means their advantage shrinks overnight. And that's where the tension begins. Because this isn't just a safety fix. It's a performance reset. But that's only the first layer. Because at the same time, the FIA is planning the exact opposite change. Increasing energy recovery. Allowing the cars to recharge faster. Which sounds contradictory. Reduce power, but recharge it faster. But the logic is clear. If the battery refills quicker, cars spend less time in that dangerous state. Less time losing power suddenly. Less time becoming unpredictable. And that directly targets the core issue. The moment where everything drops. But even that is not the full solution. Because there's another change being discussed. Reducing the total energy allowed per lap. Which means less extreme usage overall. Less full attack. Less complete depletion. Everything becomes more controlled. More balanced. But also less aggressive. And that creates a new problem. Because Formula One without full attack doesn't feel the same. Drivers managing instead of pushing. Saving instead of fighting. And that's something fans notice immediately. Even if they can't explain it. They feel it. But here's where things become critical. Because there's one change that reveals just how serious the situation is. A visual warning system. A light on the rear of the car that activates when the car is about to lose power. Think about that. Formula One needing to warn drivers that another car is about to slow down unexpectedly. That has never been part of this sport. And yet now, it's necessary. Because without it, drivers are guessing. And at those speeds, guessing is not acceptable. But even with all these changes, there are limits. Things the FIA cannot touch. They cannot change the 50-50 power split. They cannot bring back the systems they removed. They cannot reverse the core philosophy of this era. Because doing that would mean admitting something much bigger. That the foundation itself is flawed. And that's something no governing body wants to say. Not this early. Not this publicly. So instead, they adjust around the problem. Trying to contain it. Trying to stabilize it. Trying to make it work. But here's the real question. The one everything is building toward. What if these changes aren't enough? Because if they fail, this doesn't stay a technical issue. It becomes something much bigger. A question of direction, of identity, of whether this version of Formula One is actually sustainable. And that's why Miami matters more than any race so far. Because for the first time, we're not just watching racing. We're watching a system being tested, under pressure, in real conditions, with real consequences. And when the lights go out, we'll finally see the truth. Whether the FIA fixed the problem, or whether this crisis is only just beginning. And this is where everything reaches its breaking point. Because once Miami begins, there is no more theory, no more predictions, no more controlled discussions behind closed doors, only reality, at full speed. Because every single change, every adjustment, every decision made under pressure, will be exposed in the first few laps. And here's the tension no one can escape. If the fixes work, everything stabilizes. Drivers regain confidence. Cars behave predictably. Racing becomes aggressive again. Natural. Real. And just like that, this entire crisis starts to fade. It becomes a story of correction. A moment where Formula One adapted fast enough. But if they don't, everything escalates. Because now the expectations are higher. The pressure is greater. And the margin for error is gone. Because think about it. The FIA already reacted once. They already changed the rules. They already admitted, without saying it directly, that something wasn't working. So if Miami fails, what happens next? Another change? And then another? Because that's the dangerous path. Not instability in the cars. Instability in the rules. Because Formula One has always been built on long cycles. Clear regulations. Stable foundations. Teams invest years to understand one system, to master it, to dominate it. But now, that stability is starting to disappear. And once that happens, everything becomes short-term, reactive, uncertain. Teams stop building long-term advantages. They start surviving race to race. Drivers stop trusting consistency. They start adapting constantly. And the sport itself loses direction. Because when rules change under pressure, they stop leading the sport. They start following it. And that's a fundamental shift. But here's the part that connects everything. The drivers have seen it. They felt it. They pushed, and the FIA reacted. Fast. That changes the balance. Because now the grid knows something. If they align, they can force change. And that power doesn't disappear. It grows. Stronger with every situation like this. And that means the next time something feels wrong, the response will come faster, louder, more direct. Which puts the FIA in an even more difficult position. Because now, they're not just managing regulations. They're managing expectations. From drivers, from teams, from fans, from the entire sport. And that's a pressure that doesn't go away after one race. It stays. It builds. It defines what comes next. So when Miami finally happens, you're not just watching cars on track. You're watching a test of control. Who really has it? Who is shaping the direction? And who is reacting to it? Because if the FIA gets this right, they regain authority. They stabilize the sport. They prove this era can still work. But if they don't, then this moment becomes something else. Not a fix. A turning point. The moment where Formula One stopped controlling its future and started chasing it. And once that happens, everything changes. Not just for Miami. Not just for this season. But for what Formula One becomes. From here on forward.